So, you both cheated on each other? Did you think that it would somehow cancel each other out and not affect your marriage? I asked the question without any judgment in my voice, addressing the couple sitting opposite my chair. I was aiming for curiosity, not judgment. I tried to get them to talk about their relationships and the problems that brought them to my counseling office. The couple sat on two separate chairs and we formed a sort of loose triangle. They sat a few feet apart from each other, about where they could still participate in our three-way conversation. They both deliberately avoided the cozier, more comfortable couch because they would have to sit closer to each other. Both were nervous and avoided looking at each other. We spent a few minutes during which Lisa and Brad introduced themselves to me and I to them. They each spoke about their education and current work. They were recommended to my marriage counseling practice by Mike Davis, a previous patient whom I counseled along with his wife Jen as they formed an open marriage and experienced the associated stresses, came at their marriage problems from different angles, and now they are faced with an impending separation. Lisa was the first to answer my first difficult question for them. I don't think we were thinking about any kind of retribution. I somehow knew Brad was doing something, and I guessed it was with our friend Sarah. In fact, she's my best friend, or was. I haven't spoken to her since they started having sex. There was a clear bitter tone in Lisa's voice. I asked again in my curious tone, and then you got involved, so to speak? Was it justified because Brad was spending time with Sarah? Yes, with our neighbor Mike. He kept flirting and giving me more and more attention. I liked it and naturally responded to it. I never thought of it as revenge. Mike was so nice and charming. When we started seeing each other, it seemed so natural and comfortable. Brad finally spoke with bitterness in his voice. Yes, you reacted by going to bed with him. I thought you had been doing that for the last year. Lisa turned to her husband in a sarcastic tone. Just the last 6 months. I'm sorry. He filled a void in me that you didn't fill. I already knew you were entertaining Sarah before. I raised my hand at a stop sign because the couple was on the verge of an argument, something I did not want to happen in our first counseling meeting. The tone was bitter. Just for a few minutes, I would like you both to suspend judgment about what happened in the past, up until the moment you walked into this office. Try to temporarily accept what happened with curiosity, but without judgment or anger, if it helps. Now I would like each of you to tell me where you want your marriage to go from here. Do you want to stay married? Counseling is a lost cause, but you both feel like you have to pretend you're going through this for any reason. Are you willing to work to maintain what you've invested in each other? Brad responded immediately, but with suppressed anger in his voice. I want to stay married to Lisa. I still love her, but I don't know if she loves me. We haven't said the word love in months. And I hope this counseling can redirect us and heal what we have both done to each other. He crossed his arms over his chest as if to say, that's it. I turned to Lisa and she spoke hesitantly and more deliberately. I want to get back to loving Brad. The spark is still there, but honestly, I don't know. I've been taken for granted or ignored for too long, for years, and so I began to seek comfort with another man. I'm willing to put the effort into this counseling, but only if we start to see some progress. If things don't change, well, I don't see the point in continuing. Brad chimed in. You got involved with a married man, at least Sarah was single. Lisa blushed. Yes, I don't know what his wife knows about us. About me? Mike told me they had an open marriage and I never questioned that statement, otherwise I might be more cautious. I never talked to Jen to check what he said. Before all of this, we had seen each other socially a few times. Suddenly, I felt guilty for not being sure about her. Brad started to speak, but I made a subtle gesture, and he fell silent. I asked Lisa to continue. Please continue. What about the future? I hope we can go back to the way we were in the first year of our marriage, only better than then in many ways. We were so in love and we were like rabbits, making love all the time, and we gave each other exceptional attention. I felt so loved and special. We both did little things for each other, gifts, special acts of love, affectionate touches, like a surprise massage, naked or we would just sit and talk together for hours whenever we could. One time, I remember, we took sandwiches and a bottle of wine to the lake for dinner. We made a fire by the water and basically spent the whole night there just talking to each other about things that were important to us and what we wanted out of life. We couldn't get enough of each other. Brad relented and said, "Yes, it was a special time in our lives. I really enjoyed it too." I turned to Lisa. "What about Mike?" I tried to ask the question as neutrally as possible. I was interested in how Lisa would answer. Lisa winced before realizing that she had given a visible reflexive reaction to my question. "Oh, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I guess I'd like to stay friends with him somehow. And Jen too. They're a good couple. I just don't know." "What?" I turned to Brad. "What about you and Sarah in the future?" Brad blushed. She's the one who insisted I come in for counseling when I told her Lisa suggested it. We've gotten more serious the last couple of months. She's recently divorced and probably isn't keen on repeating anything like that. A real deep relationship in the near future, plus she insists that she doesn't want to be the reason for our breakup. She also wants to make sure that our communication will not interfere too much with our counseling. She even said that she will come and talk to you if that will help for some reason. As for the future, well, I hope that like Lisa and Mike, we could remain friends. I admit that I really like her, with or without sex. Lisa looked surprised by Brad's statement. "And your connection with Lisa," I guessed. Brad said thoughtfully, "Yeah, I wish it could go back 10 years too. The first year of our marriage was fun. We didn't seem to have any worries and we could just look after each other. But then, over time, I think we both started taking each other for granted and we got caught up in our jobs, home, and making money for our hobbies. I always had an endless list of things to do around the house." I asked, "Are you having money problems?" Brad shook his head. "I'm not sure how to answer that. We have a lot of credit debt, plus a mortgage and payments on 2 cars. We also have a home equity loan. Most months it's hard to cover all the expenses. Coming to you is an option." It was a big step for both of us, but we agreed that it was important. I nodded, not sure how to respond to this. I asked, "Were you fighting over money?" Lisa chimed in, "Yeah, we've been doing this all along. We have different priorities, but we're coming around more and more to the consensus that we want to get out of debt." I raised an eyebrow to ask a question. Brad said, "I was thinking about the longer term, building up equity in the house, protecting the few assets we have. Lisa was more short-term oriented, wanting to spend any excess now, or even take on some debt to do something, then fun or get the toy you want. That being said, I'm easily convinced to get my own toys too." "What toys do you mean?" Lisa and Brad both laughed. Brad blushed. "Mine include a motorcycle, an ATV, a luxury lawnmower, snowmobiles, and a small boat, to name a few big purchases." Lisa added, "It's unfair to Brad because all these toys sound so manly. I have my own expensive hobbies too, photography with only the best equipment, horse riding, golf at a club I wanted to belong to, jewelry making, and, well, I just started taking flying lessons, but I have no intention of renewing my membership." I simply nodded and again tried not to show any judgment about how much I thought they had gone overboard with their hobbies, assuming they were still going on. I noticed how Lisa came to the defense of her husband. "Are your jobs stable?" Brad nodded. "Yes, thank God. I work in technical sales and am moving up in my company. The company is growing." Lisa interrupted. "I work in marketing for a small ad agency downtown. Business is going really well this year, so I'm feeling good about all of this. I'll get a nice bonus. It'll help pay off the credit cards." I thought and looked at my notebook where I had taken notes as they introduced themselves. I began to return to the main problem. "You're living separately now, right?" Brad nodded. "I rented a room from a lonely friend, a guy who was away for 3 months on assignment, but I go check on the house and get clothes, mow the grass, and other things all the time. I try not to bother Lisa when I do this. We've only been apart for 2 years, weeks." Lisa simply nodded, confirming the fact. I felt the distance they created between themselves. I looked at the clock on the wall, positioned so that it was visible to my patients. I explained when we began our session that we would end the session in 50 minutes, as well as my general philosophy regarding couples therapy. I suggested, I would like to meet individually with each of you next week for an hour. I want to explore with each of you the roots and motivations of your marriage, your work, your infidelities, and how you will ultimately deal with them. Would you both think about this before we meet? Brad nodded. Lisa said, Yes, I'd be happy to share it with you. Brad sat across from me in a chair, obviously more relaxed than he had been a week ago when Lisa was nearby. I began the session with a simple statement. Tell me about Sarah. Brad hesitated. I knew Sarah through Lisa. They were friends. It all started after I met Sarah a few times at the Starbucks near my office. I went there almost every day, and she was there too, because that place was next to her work. At first, we were just waving to each other, but then one day I took the initiative and spoke to her. I felt awkward because I thought she was so sophisticated, but she was friendly and made me feel cozy. We ended up learning a lot about each other. I didn't mention Lisa too much, but we acknowledged our relationship and her friendship with my wife. How did you describe your marriage? I guess I said we were going through a rough patch and left it at that. Sarah didn't react one way or the other that day, and we moved on to other topics. How did things get more serious? One morning I met Sarah for morning coffee, and I could tell she was crying. Her eyes were red and her makeup was smeared. I pressed her a little, and she admitted that she had had a bad argument with her ex-husband. She was sad that the guy she loved had moved on and left her aside, even humiliating her with rude comments after they decided to cool off. Brad paused, and then continued. Lisa told me that day that she would be home late due to some late dinner with a client, so I was on my own for dinner. I took Sarah out for drinks and dinner. She immediately agreed, and we agreed to meet. Brow paused and looked at me, seemingly to gauge how much I should share at this point in our session. He continued, We met after work when I picked her up at her condo. She kissed me in the doorway, and it was like an electric shock for both of us. If I wasn't in love before, I definitely was now. We went to dinner and spent the entire evening flirting with each other. We flirted a little over coffee, but it was on a completely different level. Looking back, we were really trying to seduce each other. He paused and added, The seduction worked. After dinner, we went back to her house for a nightcap, so to speak. That nightcap turned into a lot of sex. I asked, Tenderness? Brad laughed. Lots of them. We kissed for an hour. She was burning with desire and passion. I couldn't remember the last time, when Lisa reacted to me like that. After a pause, Brad continued, We made love twice, and then I went home. Even though it was late, I still got home before Lisa. How did you feel? Guilty, you mean? Not at all. I felt on cloud nine. I felt loved and needed by someone again. I tried to think logically about the situation. For example, telling myself that I was experiencing the energy of a new relationship and that our honeymoon would eventually wear off and that we would see each other's faults and break up. I knew that I was exaggerating Lisa's faults and my concerns about her cheating, and I also knew that I was partially using this as an excuse for my actions. Can I ask how you found out about Lisa's cheating? Of course. We saw Jen and Mike about once every month or two for a barbecue or dinner, or even just drinks in the backyard when the weather was nice. Lisa and Mike started shooting glances one day, and then I noticed that they were having their own little private jokes. I found out for sure one evening when I got home late. When I went to take a shower, I happened to see Lisa's underwear on top of the wash. They had stains on them. I was shocked, but decided to hide it instead to confront her. I'm not sure why I did that. Did you like your wife's infidelity? In a way, I really turned a blind eye to what was going on. For a long time, I was sure that Lisa didn't know that I knew. Sometimes Lisa would excuse herself to go to his house for an hour or so when Jen was away. She had some good excuses about planning something for the weekend or a surprise for Jen or something like that. The excuses were weak, but I let them pass without arguing. I understand that I wanted her to go and have fun with him. Why? I liked the idea of another man entertaining my wife. I didn't contribute to the cheating other than pretending I didn't know anything. Lisa also started talking about Mike and Jen having an open marriage, as if we were supposed to do something like that. I guess she felt some guilt. I think because I tacitly agreed, we really did have an open marriage. I said, "You used having fun between Lisa and Mike and making love between you and Sarah. Would you like to comment on that difference?" Brad thought, I guess I didn't want Lisa to stop loving me and fall in love with Mike. Deep down, I was afraid that she might go to him. I have my own insecurities and jealousies. As for Sarah, I've been in love with her since the very beginning. Sex was a great addition to our relationship at that time. Brad continued, based on what Lisa said last week, she seems to be in love with Mike now. I feel like she doesn't want it to end. I can't blame her. He's a real man, handsome. He seems to have it all together and is exceptionally sexy. He thought for a minute and added, "Yes, you are probably right. What is the saying about cheating? Men do it for sex and women for love." I stayed silent to see what Brad would say next. Brad continued, I wasn't the best husband. I neglected Lisa. When we got married, I was on cloud nine with her and couldn't do enough for her. But then I became selfish. I admit it. We only had sex when that's what I wanted. I started focusing on my career, and that led to long hours, weekend work, late nights, etc. When I wasn't working, I was actively pursuing the hobbies we told you about last week, or working at home. I think because sex was always available, it became something of a thought. Brad sighed. Lisa complained at first, but then she just gave up on me, on us. She became extremely independent, developed her own circle of friends and hobbies, and just did her own thing. Sometimes we would be available to each other. We will go out with others. But it felt like we were hiding from being alone together. Yes, we had sex, but even that became less and less, especially in the last few months when we both had Sarah and Mike. I asked, "Do you feel like you need to change something about this situation?" Brad was frank and responded instantly. "Yes, hell yes. I've been thinking about Lisa a lot since our last session with you. I want to stay married to her, but I want to try to be the husband she wants and needs. I wasn't like this for most of the last decade. I want to change that. I think I need to start over with her, go on dates with her, court her, and fall in love again if she accepts me. Last night, I even dreamed that we had a remarriage ceremony. If I could arrange it, I would do that and more." I asked the question, "How will you feel about her cheating?" Brad sat back in his chair, clearly puzzled by the answer. "It will be difficult, and I'm not sure. I can forgive her, but not forget what happened. It doesn't matter who started first. We were both unfaithful to our marriage. Somehow, we need to start over." I paused again to see where Brad would take the topic. "Lisa said last week that she still wants a relationship with Mike. I'm not sure I can handle that unless other things change, like how she feels about me. I'll have to think about it more. I think, if I love her enough, I would want her to find happiness in any way, even if it is sometimes in the arms of another lover." I made a mental note to explore this same topic with Lisa the next day when she came to her appointment with me. We talked a little more about the same topics, and then our session ended. Lisa was on time for her 4-hour appointment the next day. She seemed nervous and fumbled putting her glasses in her purse as she sat down. After we sat down, I explained, "Lisa, this is our time together. I will not share anything you say with Brad, nor will I tell you anything we talked about. Part of these individual sessions are intended so that you can talk and explore the topics you need for clarity. I will ask my usual insightful questions, but you are not obligated to answer them. You seem nervous, and there is no reason for that with me. I will not complain or scold you for anything you say or do or plan to do. This is something you will have to deal with." Lisa relaxed a little. I asked the question, "What were you thinking about last week? Anything interesting?" I chuckled to myself at how neutral the question was. She nodded. "I saw Mike twice last week, but Brad and I haven't interacted at all. I know he stopped by the house a couple times. He left little notes on the back of his business card saying he was there. And how do you feel about these meetings? Well, I missed Brad. I guess I made up for it by pestering Mike to see me again yesterday. I asked him more about his open marriage. He told me about it again. I felt kind of weird knowing that his wife Jen was home alone while we made love. Well, I doubt I'd want to be in her shoes. What do you think this feeling is? Mike told me that she insisted that he come into my arms and give me a nice evening. She even conveyed her love to me through him. I haven't seen her for months. She's very sweet. I think Lisa forgot that it was Mike who recommended my services to Brad and her. How will this attitude affect your marriage in the future? Oh God, I knew you'd ask that question, and I've been thinking about it all week. She paused and looked into my eyes. I don't know for sure. Brad wouldn't enjoy being home alone the way Jen does. He would definitely sulk, and it could end up ruining our relationship. Is this what you want? No, she exclaimed. I want to be married to Brad. Have your cake and eat it too? I joked in obvious digression. Maybe. Lisa smiled at me. How would you like Brad to react? Lisa spoke slowly. I wish he would let me go the way Jen let Mike go. To say, go to Mike's and have a wonderful evening with him. To tell me, go have fun, but come home with a desire. I want him to wait for me and be a little jealous, enough that he will pay a lot more attention to me when I return. I want him to fight for me, to win me again and want to be my lover. I want him to be motivated to spend more time with me and not bring work home at night or on weekends. Do you feel guilty about your relationship with Mike? Yeah, a little bit. I didn't think I would when it started, but now I do, because it alienated Brad. But then he also left himself because of the way he treated Sarah, and that made me angry too. Me at him. After a pause, she said, "We really brought our marriage to the brink of destruction, didn't we?" Too late? No, I don't think it's too late, but we really need to start over. What does this entail? I think we should date and fall in love again. I'm ready to try. Would you like me to encourage Brad to do this to you? Ask you out on a date? Oh, yes, of course. He'll be embarrassed and maybe a little mad at me, but could you? I'll call him before the next session and suggest just that. Thank you. I asked, if you fall in love with Brad again, what will happen to your relationship with Mike? I want to love them both. I'm sure I can because I'm almost there. I gave her time to think. Lisa continued, a minute later, we do people a disservice by allowing them to love only one person in the name of exclusivity and monogamy. I know I can love Brad and Mike and possibly others at the same time. My heart would expand and I would feel so good about all this. It should be in plain sight, however. I asked, don't you think this is idealistic? Lisa laughed for the first time this session. Yes, all of that, but I still think so. I think we've been socialized into thinking that monogamy is a sacred relationship goal. That's nonsense, sorry. If we had done this openly, Brad might have loved me and kept Sarah in my life. I would have Mike. Maybe Brad and I could both love Jen or someone else. Sure, we would have our differences and petty arguments, but none of them would become critical like in normal relations. Lisa, what about Brad cheating? Part of me wants to say, right, so what? Not a big deal. We both made our infidelities a big deal because they became a substitute for something we weren't getting in our marriage and didn't want to fight to get. We were both in denial and doing what we needed for ourselves. We should have sat down and talked, and maybe come to the same result, but at least we wouldn't pretend the other didn't know what was going on. We were terrible at communication. We never let the other know how bad things were or what ideas we had for fixing it. Will it be different now? I'm willing to make this a new rule if we both act like it. No more secret lives. How should your own behavior and actions change in the future? Lisa sighed. I'll go back to trying to work this out with Brad. We'll negotiate more. We'll talk more. I'll flirt with him more and be more open to our love affairs. I'll even take the initiative. I'll be available to him. Dating and even suggesting them, I'll try to make sure that Brad knows that I think about him and that I want to be married to him, that I love him. Yes, I love him, you know. If you continue your relationship with Mike, Brad might think of himself as a cuckold. How do you feel about that? I don't want to humiliate Brad in any way. I wouldn't tease him about it. Based on what he said, it hurts him knowing that I had sex with Mike, but I wouldn't use it against him. This excitement would be for the benefit of our relationship. I hope he understands that. She paused and added, I think you understand that I don't want to stop dating Mike. I nodded. What do you think could be the negative consequences? Lisa thought about it. Jealousy in all its forms, for one thing, and it could get bad if I don't manage it with him and myself. I think sometimes awkward situations could arise, like if I were seen with Mike, and someone we know saw us, and Brad wasn't there. I suggested, tell me more about jealousy. Well, Brad could easily be jealous of my time and affection for Mike. How intense that becomes will likely determine the course of both relationships. I hope I don't find myself in a situation where I have to choose one over the other. I was jealous of Sarah. When I thought about her, she's beautiful and free. I had visions of Brad running away with her, but he kept coming home. How will you cope? Boundaries. We're going to have to set boundaries and have a lot of discussions about them. How much, how often, all that stuff. We have to promise to watch for warning signs that we're leaning too much towards our lovers and not paying enough attention to each other. We also have to discuss why it happens. We'll have some uncomfortable and dark conversations from time to time, but if we can get through them, I think it will make us stronger. We explored some more topics for the day, and then our time was up. I called Brad, as I promised Lisa. Brad, Dr. Cole is here. I have a quick suggestion that I'm passing along from Lisa. Hey, Doc, what's this? Ask Lisa out. Take her somewhere and be the perfect gentleman. My suggestion is, don't try to end the evening in bed, but if that happens, that's okay too. Just be a fun, nice, considerate guy. Is this what she wants? A date with me? Yes, exactly. You mentioned this idea too, otherwise I wouldn't have tied you up. I think this might start to turn things around for the better. Don't feel pressured to discuss your relationship. Just go with the flow of whatever you decide and have fun. Brad said with some enthusiasm, I promise I will. Thanks, Doc. I listened right before I opened the door to my waiting room. I heard Brad and Lisa laughing, and when I opened the door a crack, I could hear them excitedly discussing the new movie. I took this as a good sign. Good afternoon. Please come in. I welcomed the couple into my office. We said hello and everyone sat down. I noticed that both Lisa and Brad were smiling. They also didn't move their chairs further apart as they had on their first visit. I said, your smiles are reassuring. Lisa was the first to chime in. We had fun last night. We went to see the new James Bond movie. Brad chimed in. The special effects were amazing, and the stunts were spectacular. I nodded. It looks like you had a good time together. I emphasized the word together. This moment did not pass them by. Brad said with self-criticism, I admit, I was a fool. We should have done this all along. Yes, we had fun. Lisa turned serious. I agree, it was fun, but we still have a long way to go. Both of us. I liked Brad, who I was with last night. He was the same man I fell in love with years ago. Brad nodded. He added, and I still love Lisa. I asked, what now? We have another date planned for tonight. Just drinks and dinner, really, and we'll plan another one. So, everything is fixed? I was joking. Both said at the same time, no, Lisa continued. We need to talk about boundaries. We kept the conversation on our date very much in the present. We didn't talk at all about the past and the problems that lie there. Brad nodded. Yeah, we need to think about where we're going given the past. I kind of understand what boundaries are. It's like the rules we agreed on, right? I said, that's what you make of it. Rules, principles to live by, lines we've agreed not to cross, or we have rules about when to cross them. Think of them as things you speak that determine how you think and act in various aspects of your world, such as your relationships. This is especially true of how you will react to various situations that you have anticipated, such as interactions with other people. Brad said, "What about the things we can't predict?" I asked, "What would be a good rule in this situation?" Both were silent for a long time. Lisa broke the silence. "Maybe we can agree that if possible, we'll talk to the other person about it first, or if that's not possible, we'll tell them what happened after the fact." I suggested, "Give me a hypothetical example." I wanted them to flesh out some of the sensitive situations that might make each of them uncomfortable with the other's behavior. Lisa started again. "Okay, Brad, on a business trip, meets an attractive woman, and they have chemistry. Their interaction leads them to drinks and dinner, and then, oh, surprise, to her hotel room. Or his. How should Brad behave?" Brad suggested a mirror case. "Or Lisa drinks, dines, and invites a handsome gentleman to her room. Now what?" I shrugged. "What do you think the rules or standards of behavior should be? I'm not your moral compass here." Lisa said, "I guess, according to our new prenup, I would want Brad to be loving and kind to that woman. I want him to enjoy his time with her and come back to me excited and even more loving, ready to discuss it. Discuss it." I turned and said, "Brad, I like even the thought of Lisa in this situation. I have a little problem with double standards here, but I guess I have to agree with her boundary. They can have sex." I pointed out to Brad because it was an important point. "You say, they can have sex, as if you're allowing it to happen. Are you stepping into a parental role?" Brad shook his head. "Yes, but I didn't mean to. To absolve myself of responsibility, I should have said something like, Lisa must decide what happens next." Lisa insisted, "But you'd want to control if you could, right?" "I try not to, darling. I know that I cannot own you, and that you are now more than ever an independent person. This change over the last decade or so has shocked me in some ways. You are so independent and strong." Lisa laughed. "You made me like this." "Huh? When you decided to get serious about your career and spend all this time at work, I was left alone and wondering what to do. I became the most independent person you can imagine." "About?" Brad sounded depressed. I asked Lisa, "Is there anything good in this?" Lisa smiled. "Yes, I'm not a little woman, submissive and waiting for my husband's instructions on every little thing. Plus, I get a good salary and bonuses at work because I'm determined and exceptionally good at what I do. I think for myself, though, I guess that means I tend to make some decisions and do things that Brad wouldn't agree with." She looked to Brad for confirmation and to see his reaction. I turned to Brad. "Is this the kind of wife you want?" Brad nodded slowly. "Yeah, she definitely is. I wouldn't know what to do with someone who wanted me to dominate. I'd probably try, but I'd end up failing. I'll have my own opinions on issues, but I know they are not necessarily correct. I know that good marriages today are built on compromise and cooperation, not control. I hope Lisa feels the same way." Lisa nodded and said, "Oh, I agree, but since we are starting over, I already have my own territories allocated, areas on the home front where I made decisions and managed, quite successfully, if I may say so. When you appear on this stage, we will have points of friction." Brad said, "Let me know where they are. I'll try not to step on your feet." I asked, "Where else do you think the boundaries should be?" I knew my own list of things they would need to talk about, but wanted to see if they had enough sense to get there on their own. We spent the rest of the hour discussing two topics. The first concerned getting their family financial situation in order. The second theme was based on scripts that the couple had previously created, sex with others and commitment to each other. After some discussion, I asked the couple a question to reflect on for the week. What does your commitment to each other and your marriage look like? And how is that different from what you have done before? Welcome back. Nice to see you both. After we were seated, I began, "So have you thought about my last question?" I looked at my notes. Lisa began, "Yes, this is difficult, partly because the question is loaded with stereotypes and myths from society and the church." Brad nodded in agreement. He explained, "We've been on 2 dates since we last saw you and discussed your question both times. It's deep and complicated and we're still working through it." I asked, "Did you consider that some of your words were wrong or right?" Lisa laughed. "You mean judging each other as wrong or right? So we came up with the idea of challenging everything that we somehow learned. One of us would say something and the other would ask, 'Where did you get this idea?' We realized that we were just accepting a bunch of nonsense and never examined what we believed or how we got there. We were brainwashed." I asked, "How is this?" I was pleasantly surprised by what the two said. I loved the level of critical thinking they brought to their relationship. Brad said, "Well, our discussions about boundaries led us to a discussion about loving more than one person and how that might work. We decided that we could love more than one person without taking psychic energy away from the other person we love." Lisa said, "We also talked about the many options of what that love could look like, and I mean including adult romantic love with sex." Brad said, "One of the things we talked about earlier, I'm more comfortable with the idea that Lisa could have a loving relationship with Mike, and it wouldn't ruin our marriage. We even talked about how we could benefit from such a location. By the way, we are meeting them socially on the weekend. This will be another one of our dates, but the first time we see other people." I asked, "Are you still living separately?" Lisa turned to Brad. "Yes, but I hope he changes his mind soon and comes home. I miss him next to me and around me. I want my lover and best friend back." Brad volunteered, "I feel like this separation was good for us. It was a kick to me being a good husband to Lisa again." Lisa gave him a sad look, and I realized that she had stepped over an obstacle to save the relationship. I asked, "So, Lisa, how would you feel if Brad continued to see Sarah?" "Yes, we talked about it. I even encouraged him to see her this week, and I say that considering everything that it implies about their meetings. And before you ask, I don't feel left out or that I'm doing penance. For seeing Mike, the two of them meeting will be another great experience for them, for Brad, and for my girlfriend. So what about commitment in your marriage?" Brad began slowly. "I'm not sure you're committed to marriage in the same way that you're committed to another person. And when you do that, you're actually accepting a social contract with that person. That contract sets the boundaries that you talked about. And we should talk more about them and about a lot of other things, like how to get things back on track or how to end a relationship." Lisa nodded, and I guessed that this was the topic of their conversation. She said, "I'm committed to loving Brad and being tolerant of his moods and how passionate he is about his business. By doing this clearly, I think it will take the edge off my anger at being ignored when he's in this state. I'm also committed to being supportive. His relationships with Sarah or other women, but not if it begins to humiliate me in any way, or worsen our relationship." Brad told me, "I told Lisa that I feel the same way about her. I will be her home base and her protector when some other area of her life goes wrong, including her relationship with another person. I will wrap her in my love in the best way I can, in my own way. I'll also let her give me a kick sometimes to wake me up to the fact that I'm back to my old ways of interacting with her." I suggested, "And you're both happy with this?" Both replied, "Yes, very happy." I chimed in with another question. "Does trust play any role in all of this?" A long silence reigned. Brad said, "You mean, can I trust Lisa to stick to our contract and our boundaries?" I nodded. His interpretation of my question was as good as any. Lisa looked uncomfortable. I interjected, "What does trust mean to you two? Does that include fidelity?" Lisa said, "I guess we have a weird understanding of fidelity if we're going to let each other love other people." Brad quickly said, "But it's okay for me, for us. I admit I'll feel uncomfortable sometimes, but this will give us a platform to discuss my feelings and her feelings too." Lisa turned to me. "Are we crazy? Do you think we're going off the deep end thinking this way?" I gave her an honest answer based on my own feelings. Trust to me is a matter of judgment. It's not an absolute black and white situation. You can decide to trust someone the same way you decide to be sad or happy about a particular situation. Even if someone did something that violated your trust in them, you can immediately return to trusting them again, if you choose. Lisa said, "So I have to go back to trusting that Brad won't go behind my back making other connections and he'll do the same for me?" I laughed. "If that's what you want to think, you and only you get to decide, just like you decide to be happy or sad about a situation or somewhere in between." Brad said, "I thought people were so absolute about trust." I said, "You can be like that if you want. I like the way you said it a little earlier. You trust your partner to stick to your contract and agree upon boundaries." Lisa philosophically noted, "Or we could have slightly loose boundaries and then be tolerant and deal with situations as they arise. Be happy or sad, depending on our perception. That way, I don't have to feel like trust has been broken." Brad said, "Situational ethics." I presented them with a hypothetical situation. "You said you'd be seeing Mike and Jen this weekend. How do you feel about that?" Both replied that they were glad to have friends, and happy to meet again. I continued, "So, Brad, how would you feel if, in the middle of the evening, Lisa and Mike excused themselves and went up to his bedroom to make love for an hour?" Brad turned pale. Awkward. I'd wonder how Jen was feeling. I'd be a mixture of happy and sad, interested and rejected, excited and jealous. I can't give a definitive answer to this situation. You've just confused my brain. Somehow I separated what Mike and Lisa did from the fact that they are our friends and we see them on Saturday." Lisa said quietly, "We should talk about this more on our next date because that's what could happen. At least I can imagine Mike making such a proposal." Brad turned around and looked at Lisa. "About?" I asked Lisa. "What would Jen do?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I've never been in this situation before. Mike assured me of their open marriage, but I don't know what it looks like in practice when we're in their living room and things start to happen." I suggested, "When you two talk, please think about this situation in more detail. Consider the options and different feelings you both might experience. I recommend that you discuss this in detail before meeting your friends and reconsider boundaries and expectations for that evening." After a long silence, I redirected the discussion again. "I'd like to get back to our short conversation about your finances. I want you to start talking about some boundaries around spending money, debt, and budgeting." The discussion ran its course from this point on for the remainder of our hour, and we parted with many open questions to consider or for us to discuss next time. I started this week's session with a more general introduction. Why don't one of you choose a topic for the next hour? Or if you have something you'd like to share with me, please do so. Brad and Lisa looked at each other and both blushed. Lisa began somewhat hesitantly. "It's been a stressful week, I think, but we've come a long way in our relationship." Brad said in a quiet voice, "I came home earlier in the week, so we're living together again." Lisa added, "And we're romantic again. I mean, we're making love." Brad nudged Lisa. "Tell Dr. Cole about Saturday." I caught the forced, neutral tone of his voice. Lisa took Brad's hand after his proposal. It was the first time they sat on the couch together, which was more than a symbolic gesture of their partnership. She said, "Well, we spent a few hours on Saturday talking about what might happen that night with Mike and Jen. We went through all the possible scenarios, talked about our boundaries, reactions, and emotions." Brad chimed in. "I encouraged her to go with Mike if the opportunity arose. I already knew they were close, so what's another time? I wanted to see how I would feel, how we would both feel, after this." Lisa said, "So we had dinner with Mike and Jen and then, well, Mike kind of pulled me aside at one point and we went up to their guest room and made love for 90 minutes. Actually, we made love twice, but, well, I refrained from commenting, but I enjoyed listening to her story. I even giggled at her embarrassment, but overall we moved beyond that. Brad said, "While Mike and Lisa were upstairs, I had no idea what to do. I helped Jen clear the table, and our conversation was businesslike. You know, will you get the grease gun? I'll get the plates from this side of the table." We loaded the dishwasher and cleaned up the leftover food and got the kitchen spotless. I was nervous, so I started cleaning everything under the sun. Brad laughed. Jen finally stopped me. We were at it for over 20 minutes. She pulled me over to one of the counters and kissed me. I was left speechless. She said, "Brad, relax. It's okay what Mike and Lisa are doing, and I support that. I know you know we have an open marriage. That's how it works." Brad continued. I was holding Jen's hips and she was standing right in front of me. I felt real chemistry with her, but I wasn't ready for anything serious. My head was a mess from the thought of my wife upstairs having sex with her husband, and we had just finished washing the dishes, some kind of prosaic activity in the background of what was happening. I suggested to Brad, "Do you think Jen understood how you felt?" "Oh, I'm sure of it. She accurately described my crazy state to me, and I agreed. And then she kissed me again, and we got into it, going from kissing to deep French kissing that really connected us on many levels. We talked about these connections. We just stood in the kitchen, kissing. The more we did it, the more fantastic the experience seemed to me. Jen eventually pulled me into the living room, and we sat on the couch with Jen on my lap. She's little. I sometimes call her my elf friend. Well, the elf and I kissed, but we also talked about open relationships and how they work. Jen talked a lot about jealousy and a term I hadn't heard before, compersion, kind of the opposite of jealousy. Even while we were talking, she was making me touch her breasts. Brad continued. Jen told me how she felt when Lisa and Mike made love upstairs. She wanted them both to fall in love and connect in mind, body, and spirit on many different levels. She wanted them both to experience more than just the joy of the physical connection, but also did not feel guilty for leaving us, and thus enjoyed the higher aspects of their union. She pointed out how unhelpful jealousy is, and how much it is a learned emotional response to certain situations involving lack or fear of an undesirable outcome such as separation. I commented, "You already knew some of the pain of this." Brad said, "Yes," and Jen built on that. She asked me if my separation from Lisa was that bad. I told her yes and no, telling her the bad parts first. Jen linked what I was feeling to jealousy, and then, one by one, associated each of the bad things I was feeling with jealousy. It seemed as if she could destroy every problem and make them disappear. I ended up feeling much better about Lisa, her relationship with Mike, my relationship with Sarah, and my new relationship and kisses with Jen. Brad sounded more optimistic as he spoke. Lisa said, "When Mike and I came downstairs, we found Jen and Brad passionately kissing. She had her top off. Jen did look happy, but Brad looked like he'd been caught red-handed, so to speak." She laughed. Jen walked up to Mike and showered him with kisses. Brad came up to me and we kissed too. I thought it would be awkward, but he seemed really relaxed about the last couple of hours I'd been with Mike. Brad said, "I was. Somehow, after talking to Jen, Lisa assured me that she loved me, that I was her primary relationship, and I leaned on those words and trusted that she meant what she said." I muttered, "Trust again." Lisa said, "We talked about trust. We both promised we wouldn't say anything we didn't mean. So when I assure Brad that I love him, I mean it with all my heart. I'm not going to lie to him or tell him what I think he wants to hear." Brad volunteered, "Lisa has told me several times since we last met how important Mike is to her and how much she loves him. And Jen. From what she said, I know it's not only sex. She feels a resonance with them that is rare. In my own reflections, I have come to the conclusion that I cannot be everything for Lisa that she wants or needs. Mike can obviously fill many of these gaps, and I am glad that he can make her more satisfied and happy." I asked, "How do you feel about Mike and Jen as a couple?" Brad responded, "I feel closer to them now than before. I see how much Mike and Lisa care for each other, and I support Lisa in that." I also see how much Jen and Mike love each other, and I felt the vibes from Jen that she wants me too. If we had more time to get to know each other, we could make love. I feel flattered and honored by the way we treat each other. Lisa told her husband, Jen really wants to make love to you. She told me. Brad simply nodded at her comment. Brad said, if I can change the subject a little, I also saw Sarah on Tuesday during a long lunch break. After we talked for 2 hours and I told her what was going on and how things were changing, we went to her apartment and made love. Lisa laughed. He came home that evening still horny and ready to make love to me, but also feeling guilty. Sarah left him like that, and I got some benefit from their meeting that afternoon. I don't know how often they do this. We did, but Brad took me twice that evening, both times in the living room, where we hadn't made love in years. I think my knowledge of this and emphasizing that I approved of their time together helped assuage Brad's guilt. I smiled. Spontaneous combustion? Brad snorted. That's exactly what happened. Having sex with 2 women in one day was, I admit, a real boost to my ego. I liked it. Sarah and I agreed to date as long as it didn't upset Lisa. We like each other, and for this, now that we're officially friends with benefits. Sarah has a lot of love for Lisa. She doesn't want to see her friend hurt. I turned to Lisa. How did you feel when Brad returned to you from Sarah's arms? Lisa frowned, but then smiled. Well, not bad at all. I was with Mike at lunchtime earlier that day. I asked, were you talking about contraception? Just curious what could happen. Lisa said, I take the pills, but Brad and I talk about starting a family from time to time. Brad nodded. I'm ready, although I think we should wait another year or so to see how we come out of this. I added to Lisa's words. There are probably boundaries in this area for you, especially if you and Mike are not using protection, as I understand it. Lisa, would you stop taking contraceptives and continue to allow both men to be intimate with you with the possibility of pregnancy from one of them? Lisa thought for a moment. Brad, what do you think? Brad responded, if Mike got you pregnant, I'd be a real cuckold, and I don't think I could handle it, let alone raise a child that isn't mine. I know there are other men who could, but not me. Lisa said to me, that's your answer, and that's fine with me. I would ask Mike to start using condoms and perhaps avoid intercourse when I'm at my fertile peak. I asked, do you know if you can have children? Both Lisa and Brad shrugged. She said, we don't know of any reason why we can't. We were just focused on our careers, but that's changing now. I encouraged, just so you know, I support your idea of waiting a year or so before taking this step, especially since you just came out of a difficult period that has been going on for years in some ways. I've seen others try to resolve problems in a marriage while having children, and usually the problem persists, perhaps even worsened, by the time both parents have to devote to the child. The results are not always good. Lisa took the lead. Brad will be a wonderful father when this happens. He is so caring when we are around the little kids. He plays with them and gets down to their level. They love him too. How has this week been for you two? I smiled at the couple sitting next to each other on the couch. They sat close to each other and held hands. Lisa smiled and Brad blushed. She said, we've had another breakthrough, I think. I looked with raised eyebrows, encouraging one of them to say more. Brad took the lead. I made love to Jen while Lisa was with Mike. Lisa pulled his hand to her generous breast. I couldn't help but notice her cleavage. She said, we even did it in the same bed for a while. It was so sexy and erotic. Brad turned beet red but added, I never thought I could do it, but we did it. We switched partners a few times, and while Mike and I relaxed, Jen and Lisa put on a show for us. Brad continued, Jen and Mike came over to our house on Saturday for a late-night barbecue. It was a warm night, and we had a pool and hot tub. After dinner, we all got naked and went for a swim. Lisa said, we then moved on to the sun loungers on the pool and started making love. It was so romantic doing it in the night air. After the first round, we went inside and showered together. We have a large shower cubicle that easily fits 4 people. We spent the second round in our big bed, and then Jen suggested we get together. I asked, and how are you feeling? Brad replied with a smile, I'm guessing you mean between me and Lisa. I'm fine, better than fine. Sometimes I get jealous about Lisa and Mike, but I know they're not going to run away with each other, so I can easily take my mind off of it. Even Jen assures me that they are a very strong couple. I know it's a matter of trust again, but I make the decision to trust what everyone tells me, and that's it. That despite all the external relationships, Lisa and I are each other's support, just as Mike and Jen are for each other. Sarah is a wonderful and loving friend, and even she knows it. She used this term when talking about herself and about me. I think I mentioned that she was recently divorced and not ready to get into any kind of serious relationship again. She was happy when I told her about Jen. I think she sees how I've calmed down and found someone else. I turned to Lisa. She said, I also talked to Sarah a lot during the week. We stopped talking when she and Brad first started dating. I think it was awkward for her, but I reassured her that I was calm about everything that happened and could happen in the future. It's all out in the open now. We talked about feelings, our boundaries, and everything else. Lisa paused for a second. I also sometimes feel the same jealousy as Brad, especially when Brad is with Sarah because she is free, beautiful, and available. But as he said, I trust his accuracy in describing his feelings and what is happening. He doesn't know yet, but I've been thinking about asking her to join us one evening. I'd like to see her and Brad together now that we've sorted out our issues. She hasn't been around lately because of all this commotion. I asked, so you are still searching and defining boundaries? Lisa nodded. Yes, I think we do. The free woman question bothers me if I'm not aware. Brad told his wife, I didn't know you felt that way. I'll talk to her about it. I think she might be on your side, but let's find out. Brad said, that would be great. I love making love to you. I want to keep some spontaneity in what might happen if Sarah and I have dinner together. I'll try to anticipate and let you know in advance, and of course, tell you when I see you. Lisa agreed. I'll do the same, but let's plan our days so that we have time at noon for each other. After our discussion began, Lisa, although Brad was also nearby, admitted, I think I love Sarah as much as Jen, or Jen as much as Sarah. Brad was surprised. Huh? Lisa leaned back and held his hand tightly. Honey, I've always loved you, but now I also love Mike, Jen, and Sarah. I loved Sarah before as a best friend, but now I find that I love her as a romantic partner too. I asked, how are you both feeling in your marriage? Brad smiled and gave him a thumbs up. He talked nonstop for 10 minutes about how great everything was now and how good he felt. I liked the transition he made, especially since he brought back some work-family fun balance into his life. Lisa finally spoke up. I agree. Everything is great and strong again. I feel loved by Brad, given attention, romantically involved, and just everything the way I wanted it to be. Even better, because things are happening that I even couldn't imagine. Brad said, me too. His smile was infectious. I said, is there any point in continuing these sessions? We could stop, but always reach out to each other if either of you is feeling out of place or unsure about something. They both nodded. Lisa said, let's do that, but we have one more reason to finish. Which? I asked. Well, we'd like to invite you to join us next Saturday night when we get together at our house with Mike, Jen, and Sarah. I know you'll like them and they'll love you and... Well, we kind of knew that your code of ethics would not allow you to accept this invitation if we were your patients, so now we are not. So, will you please come? I promise you, an interesting night. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.